Freedland. We're going to introduce him in a second. The reason we have a guest host is Rob Farian, our normal host, our usual host, and his wife, Alex, had a baby girl last night.
Excellent.
I traded text messages with Rob. All three of them are fine. Everyone's in good health. So our congratulations to the Farian family, to the terrific new addition. I've seen photos and everybody is super cute. But we are now going to introduce our guest host for this week, Howard Freedland. He is a commercial real estate specialist with Ecofine Properties in the West Palm Beach area, South Florida area. He is also a member of the Deep Knowledge Investing Board of Advisors. Howard, how was your weekend?
Good morning. It was painful. I had a martial arts training in Tampa. So I drove 4 hours each way so that I could take abuse from a bunch of people. It was wonderful.
All right. So be honest with us. What's more effective, wax on, wax off, or paint fence?
There are certain moves that I can't discuss online because no can defense.
Well, it's good to know that you're prepared, but I guess you have to be a certain level black belt to know these undefensible moves, or go to the movies in the 80s. Right?
So how was your weekend? Did you enjoy Barcelona?
Yeah, I toured some of the Gaudi museums. I took a walk through some of the Gothic cathedrals there. It's, the architecture really in that place is spectacular. Other than that, I couldn't find a, reservation at a normal hotel or an Airbnb. I ended up staying at a hostel, sharing a room with seven other people. And I'm going to tell you something, like, yet again, everybody was terrific. A bunch of us went out to dinner together. And the young people I was sharing the room with could not have been more considerate. Everybody was really nice. It's actually a really fun experience.
Did you find that Cafe Sensi that I suggested to you?
I did not. No. We ended up going out to dinner someplace else. But anyway, I was able to get some good work done there. Yeah, it was fun.
Excellent. So, it sounds like we're both rested and refreshed. Going?
Yep, let's go.
Excellent. Topic 1, U.S. government shuts down for the first time in nearly 7 years. Your take.
Yeah, so the news on this at 12:01 Eastern time on October 1st, the federal government shut down. Now, first of all, let's clarify, shutdown doesn't mean actually shut down. Most of the government, or a large chunk of it, is still operating. Other parts of it are operating and people will get back pay later. And, a variety of discretionary programs and agencies got shut down. It did furlough 900,000 federal employees, which is a fraction of the federal workforce, delayed payments to another 700,000. We remind people that essential services like Medicare, Social Security, air traffic control, national defense continue under statutory authority. So it's not so much of a shutdown. The thing that I think is really interesting, Howard, is both sides, Democrats and Republicans, are supportive of the shutdown. Republicans are not getting grief from their constituents. What I think is really interesting is big Democratic donors went to their representatives and said, do not give in, shut it down. So both sides getting a lot of support. On the Democratic side, they do not want to give in to President Trump. They don't want spending cuts. On the Republican side, they don't want to finance an additional $1.5 trillion for an extension of what were supposed to be temporary funding measures to healthcare insurance. And somehow the whole thing has really come down, like the big headlines relate to Democrats saying we will shut down the government because we want funding for people in the country illegally for their healthcare, which is making a lot of the country angry. Now, on my end, I actually agree with both sides. I am super supportive of the shutdown, but for two different reasons. First, I think it's valuable for most of the country to have a regular reminder that we can operate our lives without constant government supervision. Like, great, let's do this for a month or two and remind everybody that we don't need a nanny government to operate our lives. Second, President Trump now has the leeway to reduce the federal workforce on his own, something Doge wanted to do more of when Elon Musk was there. So I'm going to remind everybody that our federal workforce is larger than the population of 10 individual states. So, the Democrats somehow handed President Trump the authority to do what he wanted Elon Musk to do. This is an opportunity. I'm hoping there will be significant cuts. Now, I do have one piece of bad news, Howard, which is I can promise everybody watching this that the government will continue to spend more every year, take on more debt, and debase the dollar. This shutdown is theater. It's not going to stop that. So the only thing you can do is invest in such a way that you are insulated from more inflation. That's our approach. We can be angry or not angry, but the debasement will continue. Howard, the one thing I'm curious about is, do you think this affects the property market either in the South Florida area where you are or in the United States in general?
So the answer is that it can. It really depends on the length of the shutdown, because there's going to be significant stress on all governmental agencies, especially working for no pay or being furloughed in general. So getting approvals, I have a deal that just started this morning and executed, and we need significant governmental approvals, both in county and city. So I'd imagine that if the shutdown is shorter, then we're not going to see that much of a hiccup. But if this goes into weeks, that adds a multiple of weeks to anything on the backlog. And it's not like they're all going to race right back in there and catch up immediately. This is the speed of government. So I think it's a catch. There's a lot you have to look at with this. The longer it goes, the harder it's going to get. And if it gums up the system, and right now we have pent up transactions, all that's going to do is cause people to second guess their transactions. You'll see people fall out of them or businesses fall out of them. So I'm not saying gloom and doom. I'm saying that the longer it goes, the harder it gets to keep things on track.
I think that's a really interesting point. And last week, there's a blog that I read about antitrust. Basically, it's all legal stuff. And one of the things that was pointed out is somehow people who want to get mergers done manage to have the antitrust regulators able to approve new mergers, but not challenge existing mergers. And basically, it's the analysis was, hey, somehow people with money found a way to ensure that the transactions they wanted approved got approved. The transactions they don't want impeded can't be impeded. And the transactions that you are working on personally, Howard, nobody cares whether those get done or not. So that's not going to happen. I will add one positive from all of this, and I'm in no way suggesting that the negative you pointed out is not significant. It is. But a lot of the fiat economists, and I do use that term with derision, they were wailing last week that the shutdown is going to harm GDP growth. And I'm going to point out again that wasteful government spending does add to GDP the way we calculate it, while often destroying value. That's not real value, right? So the government spending less money, yes, it will bring GDP down, but is it really harming production? And the answer to that is no. And I think that's the reason the stock market shrugged and spent every day since the shutdown up.
Well, all I can tell you is, as somebody with $1 million transactions as opposed to $1 billion transactions, it is frustrating on our level not to know certainty and be able to rely on certain things happening. But it's not doom and gloom. Business is still moving forward. I will be back in touch with you within weeks and let you know whether or not this is coming to fruition or not.
Or maybe you should just tell your clients that if they were to switch from $1 million transactions to $1 billion transactions, you could get them approved.
You know, why didn't I think of that? Yeah, I'll get right on that. Anyway, is there anything else you want to add about government shutdown, or shall we move along?
No, nothing I haven't said 500 times on previous versions.
And I've read as well. So I also play editor on this. So pharmaceuticals, drugs. We got lots to talk about. There's big news. What do we got?
Yeah. All right. So last week, President Trump announced a 100% tariff. Sounds big, but stick with me. It's not as big as it seems. A 100% tariff on all branded or patented drug imports from companies not building U.S. plants. That went into effect October 1st. Guess what everybody decided to do? They responded with price cuts. direct-to-consumer discounts. We'll talk about that more later in this episode. And guess what? Talked about plans to start building plants in the United States. Now, normally, I am not so much of a fan of government interference in the economy or with private companies. In this case, I'm breaking a rule. I am strongly in favor of this, and there's a really good reason. So, a little drug history. The United States used to make most of its drugs in Puerto Rico. And the reason for that is there were tax benefits to that. Well, what happened was some genius in Washington said, oh no, we have people making money without being taxed. We have to eliminate this tax benefit because we hate big drug companies. Okay, well, I understand that. Well, here's what happened. They then eliminated the favorable tax treatment, and instead of getting taxes on that production in a US territory, all of that production ended up primarily moving to China. Okay, great. So what we have now is we don't get taxes. We don't get the benefit of collecting taxes on these, companies that Washington likes to call evil. But the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, now has massive leverage over the United States. So think about it. Just a couple of months ago, we saw the White House bend to China on high-end GPUs from NVIDIA when China cut off access to rare earth elements. Well, what do you think happens here if, China invades Taiwan? The United States says, hey, we don't want you to do that. We're going to try to stop you. And China says, okay, great. Well, we're going to kill grandma. We've cut off your prescription drug supply. Now, I've heard people say ridiculously, no, China won't do that. They get money from that. They want them. They don't care. They do not care. They will cut off our drug supply. And so basically, because we've had decades of outsourcing, we have put ourselves in the hands of the CCP, and that is a really big bargaining chip they have there. So what President Trump just did with this announcement of tariffs is provided a gigantic incentive for drug companies to manufacture in the United States, and those companies appear to be responding. I am in favor of reshoring, doubly so in crucial industries like drug production. I like this move.
Okay. It does sound like it has the potential to be really successful. So we'll see if everybody falls in line for companies start bucking the system. But overall, it's pretty lucid thought.
And you know what? One thing that we are going to talk about later in this issue, it'll be really interesting to see the response of Democrats, because they've hated the drug companies for years and talked about wanting lower drug prices for years. Domestic supply is certainly a national security issue. It'll be really interesting to see if they revert to their previous support of these kinds of measures, which the drug companies might not like, but would be useful for the country, or if they're going to try to fight President Trump. So, it'll be interesting to see what their response is going to be.
Well, we're going to get out of performative politics and get to brass tacks really quickly, because the faster that they solve it, the faster everybody looks better to their base. And yes, it's giving President Trump a victory, but the Democrats are getting what they want. So it seems to be a win-win. We'll see how we manage prosperity.
We'll see if both sides can be content to win.
Indeed. Number 3 is a favorite of mine. I'm really looking forward to talking about this. We got electronic arts being taken in an LBO, and I've got a soft spot in my heart for this, and I know you do too.
Yeah, absolutely. So electronic arts, EA is the ticker. They are being taken private in the largest leverage buyout of all time. One thing I think is really interesting, back when you and I were in college, in 1989, I think, we had the takeover of RJR Nabisco. Believe it or not, it's still on the list. DK intern Cash and Crow put together the exhibit this week, and I think we're looking at RJR Nabisco in 4th place on the all-time list, despite the fact that transaction is at this point, more than 35 years old. It's incredible. Anyway, the companies and people acquiring electronic arts include Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, Silver Lake, and Jared Kushner from the White House, or the president's family, rather. They've partnered to do a $55 billion acquisition of electronic arts. It's one of Silicon Valley's gaming giants. They are known for sports games like Madden and FC. That's a soccer game. and Battlefield. The company has struggled a bit in recent years. Some of their recent efforts have not been well received. The thing that I'm hoping to see here is the fact that the video game business has become more challenging. New games can cost hundreds of millions of dollars to develop. Not all games are going to recover those costs. It's very much a winner takes all kind of business right now. As a result of that, because you have such high development costs, but not necessarily an audience for it, it incentivizes the studios to play things safe and keep making updates to popular IP. So instead of getting something new, you'll get the 17th edition of the Battlefield games. Madden's a little bit different. That because you have different players and stats every year, I get why they do an update of that every year. The one thing I'm really hoping to see is the public companies have been using these unpopular microtransactions to make their quarterly earnings estimates. So the question is, if you have a leveraged buyout and you don't have to report quarterly earnings, can these companies be a little more gamer friendly, not focus so much on the microtransactions, besides the fact that gamers hate them? You also have the issue of these loot boxes, which are basically, it's legalized gambling for 12-year-olds. And it's gotten young kids, A, into trouble, and B, kind of hooked on gambling. So I'm really hoping to see a whole lot less of that in the future. Howard, I know you've got thoughts on EA in particular. What are you thinking?
Well, I remember, I believe, I want to say it was back, was it 1995 or was it earlier, where we started with Bullfrog's edition through EA of Dungeon Keeper. And who didn't love this game? It was actually one of the most popular games created in that era. That and Diablo were, I think, the two top games for a while. And who doesn't love a good forces of evil fighting the forces of good? So, especially when you represent evil. So I think that if they're going to do reboots and they're going to be doing extra editions, yes. There's an awful lot of really good gaming that is available, but this generation really hasn't seen because of game consoles and various other aspects and how it's grown. And to have reboots of some of these games might actually do very, very well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. So the games Howard's talking about were developed by Bullfrog. Bullfrog was bought by EA a couple of decades ago. And he's right. The original Dungeon Keeper and then the sequel, Dungeon Keeper 2, were hugely popular games. They were going to do a third edition. I'm kind of surprised that that particular series died out so quickly. It seemed like the kind of thing where they might be making, Dungeon Keeper 10 right now. But it never really caught on. And the God games or the real-time strategy games kind of fell by the wayside. I'm not really sure why.
I'd like the easy answer is, wow, they took up so much time to play. But if you take a look at what it takes to play some of the, the games that people team up on, I think that it really comes out to, okay, what's keeping their interest? And if it's marketing, EA is a phenomenal marketing company. They always have been. I think grabbing interest in nostalgia. And I just had a conversation not too long ago with somebody who specializes in this sector. And he said, look, people look for what was important to them as they were growing up. And it's not that everybody wants to, from our generation, play Pong. It's that there are other games that are much more sophisticated, ones we're talking about through EA, that I think if they were given a second chance to, you'd have a whole other generation going into video games and enjoying them again.
So it's really interesting that you say nobody wants to play Pong, because Atari within the last few years came out with a series, what I forget what they call them, but a series they look like the Atari 2600, but they've got a whole bunch, like maybe 50, 60, 80 of the Atari cartridges loaded onto it. Right. And you could play, and those things sold. And if you take a look, I actually follow Atari on Twitter or X. I'm very proud of the fact they responded to one of my posts a year ago. But they're putting out new joysticks in all different colors, and they're still making hardware for people our age who have nostalgia for those great 2600 games.
People don't want the most recent version of Mario this or Mario that, but Super Mario Brothers was incredible for Nintendo. You go back to what was important to you during your time and what sparks an interest. It's the Rosebud effect. You know, you
Yeah.
don't want to get to the point where you can't enjoy what you came up on. So there are great platforms available, and EA, I think, could make a pretty big move in getting a different generation involved in the video games if they can do this properly.
All right. So, Howard, credit to you, one, for making the first Citizen Kane reference ever on this channel. And two, for pointing out the fact that EA has an incredible IP library that they haven't been mining. And it probably wouldn't cost them a lot to do remasters and re-releases of some of the old games that they love. You don't necessarily have to spend $100 million on the next Battlefield. You could just mine your existing IP. It'd be interesting to see if they do that.
Again, accessibility, and also, look, the computers are getting much, much faster. So all of the older software that we had doesn't keep up. It doesn't run properly with the new systems. So they have to reissue something that is going to be more compatible to the speeds that we've got. But if they do that and things run properly and there's no glitching, then I think that again, it could be very, very successful for them. It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. And you know what? There are good emulators.
Yeah.
MAME is a great emulator for arcade games. Stella for all the Atari games, and they run fine on the latest computers. So it is possible to do.
Absolutely. So President Trump cut the middleman with TrumpRx. What have you got for this?
Yeah, so the Trump administration just unveiled TrumpRx, a Trump-related direct-to-consumer government run by President Trump website selling pharmaceutical drugs at a discounted price. For those of you who want to make fun of the name TrumpRx, I'll pause briefly while you may do that, or just put it in the comments. That would be fine. The website is set to launch in early 2026. Important to note that the government will not be selling drugs to consumers. It just lets Americans buy prescription medications directly from the drug makers, bypassing middlemen like pharmacy benefit managers, who are often responsible for much of the drugs price markup. So the government's not selling the drugs. It's just going to operate the system. I'm going to point out, just from a personal point of view, that there have been times that I've tried to buy a prescription drug like in CVS using insurance, and it's been really expensive. And I've said, okay, well, wait, what if I just buy it without the insurance? So like, oh yeah, that's much cheaper, because you're skipping the pharmacy benefit manager. And so I now ask that question, right? If there's an expensive prescription, it is amazing how much cheaper it can be for certain drugs to just pay cash. This discounted cash pay program comes just as President Trump's 100% tariff on internationally produced drugs goes into place. And so, one of the things that these programs are trying to attack is the fact that foreign consumers often pay less for drugs than Americans do. Americans have been shouldering a disproportionate amount of the research and development for these kinds of drugs. Pfizer jumped in, took advantage of the deal. They secured 3 years of tariff protection in exchange for being a major participant in this drug program. I think Eli Lilly, Bristol Myers Squibb may enroll in the program at a later time. So you've got the big drug companies taking a look at this. So, look, Howard, I'm going to tell you honestly, my views on this matter have changed. If you spoke to me 20, 30 years ago, I would have said, do not do this. Don't get involved. The drug companies are going to charge what they charge. And in fairness, the drug companies did use a lot of that money for developing the next generation of drugs. And so for many, many years, you frequently had Democrats saying, hey, drug prices are too expensive. Let's crack down on the drug companies, right? And people like me were saying, wait, if you do that, you will have crippled their incentive to make new drugs. And that's not a good idea. And then again, it was primarily the Democrats who said, okay, fine, let's do reimportation, right? If Americans are paying a high price for drugs in the United States, but it's cheap in Canada, then let's buy it cheap in Canada and bring it in here. And, there were all kinds of regulatory issues with that. So But what's happened here is Democrats have been reasonably angry about high drug prices that Americans pay, and Republicans have been reasonably angry about some of the unfavorable hidden research that the drug companies have hidden related to certain vaccines. So, you know what? At this point, maybe both sides will support this effort. My views on the matter have changed, but to me, it looks like TrumpRx, silly name or not, and which is pushed for this most favored nation policy. This is playing right into old Democratic policies, and he's doing it at a time that Republicans are not so happy with the drug companies. I'm wondering, could he possibly get support from both sides of the aisle on this? What do you think?
So I think that it's definitely possible on its face. But the real problem, and this gets political, and I don't mean for it to, but what I'm going to say is that anytime you put Trump's name on something, it is inflammatory to the Democratic side. And it is a knee-jerk reaction. You could say the Trump $1 million give back, where everybody in this country gets $1 million, which, based on your argument before, perhaps we're already getting. So it's, but if they would have called it anything else, it's about packaging. And Obama had this problem with his health care. You don't brand with the name of an individual. Yes, they want credit, but if you take away the personal side of politics and you just say, look, here's the program, everybody benefits, how about it? Then I think you get a lot farther. That's where we are as a country right now. It's very much name driven. And I think that they're making a mistake by branding it that way. And he should put his ego aside. That being said, it sounds like it's got the potential to work for everybody. So why the hell are we arguing about it?
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting point. It seems like from a policy point of view, it should get support. I wonder what would have happened had he labeled it, instead of calling it TrumpRx, had he called it Obamacare, the sequel.
You can make the jokes. I'm being totally honest. There's a visceral reaction to from the left in looking at anything that's branded Trump. If he would have taken the time to say, here's a new drug policy, and not, you could have called it Bob. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just, don't pick something that you know is going to agitate if you want the support. On the other hand, if you're going to jam it through, then jam it through. But
that's it. Hang on one second. He may have just put the Democrats in a position of either supporting TrumpRx or telling Americans, no, we want you to pay higher prices for your drugs, and we're against a discount drug program. That's not the position.
That's not even going to be the most ridiculous thing that happens this week. So don't get stuck on
it. Fair enough.
Our last point today is an educational topic, breaking down the bid-ask spread. What can you educate us on?
All right. So just like everything in life, stock prices are quoted with a bid-ask spread. Now, that might sound a little complicated. It's actually not. The bid is the highest price somebody's willing to pay. The ask is the lowest price at which somebody's willing to sell shares. So let's use an example for, a stock that is traded at $50, and let's just say it's quoted 50 and 50 and a quarter. What that means is that you have people bidding, they're willing to pay $50 for that stock. You have people willing to sell at 50.25, right? $50.25. And that's all that it is. And so when that's your bid offer spread, $50, $50.25. When there's overlap, a trade takes place. So if somebody says, well, wait, I don't care about the quarter, I'm willing to sell at $50, a trade takes place. Or if somebody wants to buy and they say, I'll pay the extra quarter, a trade takes place on the offered side. And so this is no different. And Howard, you'll have comments on this in a bit. But it's no different than if you were to try to sell your house, right? If you're the seller, you say, I'm willing to sell for this price, a high price. And a buyer might say, yeah, we don't want to pay that price. We'll pay you a lower price. And a deal will take place when there's overlap. And typically there will be a few rounds of negotiation where each round the seller would say, okay, I'll take a little bit less. The buyer says, okay, I'll pay a little bit more. When I bought my house, we did 3 rounds. We were done in a day because I thought the sellers were being reasonable. And eventually, we came to a price, and that's all it is. The one thing that I will caution investors about. So with deep knowledge investing, we are typically looking for stocks that can go up by more than 100% over a multi-year period. Sometimes we've had stocks that have gone up 3x or 4x or more in certain situations. And in situations like that, it doesn't really matter, if you pay the extra quarter or not. And I don't typically spend a whole lot of time worried about the bid offer spread or whether I got the very best price. If something's going to go up 100%, 200%, 300% over a few years, it's not relevant. But for those of you who are doing more short-term trading, day trading, this is important, and you should view that bid offer spread as a cost of trading. So when you go to Schwab or you go to Robinhood and they say, hey, commission-free trading is free. It's not free. It's not free. They're selling that order flow to places like Citadel, or they're capturing that bid offer spread. And so if you're day trading or short-term trading, these kinds of spreads, your bid offer spread, just view it like you'd view a commission, right? If your Robinhood people say commission-free trading, but your spread is 25 cents, then just pretend you're paying a 25-cent per share commission, right? It's just an expensive trading. And that's how I would recommend that people view it. Is it a big deal that you pay that 25 cents? Really depends on what your thesis is and how long you plan to hold it.
It's complex. I mean, but the people that sign up for deep knowledge investing can get your access to speak with you and talk through certain things. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, this is what we do all day, and I'm regularly corresponding with DKI subscribers and talking. And in fairness, we do have some really smart investors in our subscriber base, so
Right.
people aren't really saying, "Hey, does it matter if I pay the extra dime?" They know it doesn't matter if they pay the extra dime or not, because we're looking across a multi-year time horizon. And if people, say, hey, should I pay the offered side on this? My response is, I don't know, because I'm not really thinking about this stuff as a day trade. Where we tend to get a little tighter with stuff like that is every now and then I see an options trade that is just really mispriced. And that's something where, you have to trade it a little more tightly. And I'm buying something because I think it's going to move in the next couple of weeks or next couple of months. Right. In situations like that, the pricing does matter more. But when that happens, I send out an urgent email to all the subscribers and to tell them, I just bought this option just now. This is exactly what I paid. And, then they have that as a mark.
Well, understanding these principles are paramount to actually investing properly and not losing your money or your mind at the time. So it's a benefit of actually joining up and being a member of Deep Knowledge Investing, and that could help people through these types of situations, right?
That's what we're doing all day.
Yeah. Well, I know you've helped me before. We've talked through a number of different investments, and I've always valued it. And that's not just because I'm part of your team. It's just that you have far more expertise than I do. If it was real estate, you would come to me and we would talk about investment. But when it comes to this type of analysis, you've got it covered. So I hope people will take you up on this.
All right. Well, terrific. Thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words there. Let's get ourselves wrapped up here. First of all, Howard, thank you so much for guest hosting. Always great to have you on. Hope you'll be our guest host more often. Congratulations to the Farian family, Rob and Alex and the new baby girl. I think her name is Eleanor Rose. I got to check my text messages. I think I'm right on that. We're going to have to check. But congratulations to them. We'll have Rob back in the usual hosting chair next Monday. Also, thanks to the Flying V team. Nazim the Dream Abbas is here with us right now.
Yes, ensuring that.
Yes, exactly. And round of applause for the DKI interns, Cash and Crow, Gideon Rodham, and Samak Jain, who, as usual, do a ton of the heavy lifting here. And then for those of you who have spent your time and energy watching, we really appreciate it. We know your time is valuable. Thank you for spending it with us. If you want to give us a like and subscribe, we'd appreciate it. But hey, do what you want. We're not the boss of you. We'll see you guys next week.
Take care.